For me, I'm gonna say for now, this is an overreaction. Buried him in the turf with his chin strap around his nostrils. He calls a timeout. Good wherewithal by Eli. Great wherewithal. This is sick. Put this to music. I don't think he stepped out either. That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Welcome back to another edition of the Giant Overreaction. Man, we got a special guest today. Today's show is going to absolutely be amazing. I know I missed out on you guys last week, so I want to catch up, just kind of give you guys a little bit of updates on where I'm feeling going into the draft here. We're just over a week before the draft gets here. Definitely very, very, very exciting times. Joe Schoen just had his press conference today. Not a lot to gain from that, I can't lie, but he did talk about if they were going to go quarterback or not, talking about it is an important position to be able to address, to be able to bring in a young franchise quarterback, and if they believe in a quarterback, then they're absolutely going to draft one. But let's get right to it. We're going to shake things up today. I know today's going to be a legendary stream. A lot of y'all did not get a chance to see some of my statements, some of my thoughts on pick number 3 going into the draft here, more in particular on Shedeur Sanders and whether or not I would pull the trigger and draft a guy like Shedeur Sanders with the 3rd overall selection. I tweeted this out yesterday on Twitter, got a lot of pushback from the New York Giants community. I said, count me out on Shedeur Sanders at pick 3. And I kind of just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a quick breakdown before we get this show started. So Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, does do a lot of things well. Accuracy, leadership, toughness, all of the things that you're hearing a lot of the national media pundits talk about. But those are things, in my opinion, that every NFL quarterback must have. In my opinion, the mechanics definitely need a ton of work. I've looked at a bunch of games, went over about 2 passes of all of his tape from all of his games from 2024. Bit of a crooked drop back, in my opinion. Absolutely a drifty type of guy in the pocket, likes to backpedal rather than step up in the pocket. And maybe some of these symptoms here are, symptoms of playing behind a terrible, one of the worst offensive lines that I've ever seen. But I don't see the arm strength. I don't see the next level processing that a lot of people are talking about. I don't see the anticipation with a capital A for all my quarterback school watchers out there. And the amount of throws that are behind the line of scrimmage for me are absolutely alarming. 24% of his attempts were behind the line of scrimmage. 74.9% of his completions were 9 yards or less. He had the largest percentage of yak in the entire nation. And like I said, there's just a lot of things that I see on the tape that would absolutely have me out on Shedeur Sanders with pick number 3. He walks into sacks. He's very slow, not that mobile. I'm not saying that he can't succeed in the NFL. I'm just saying that with the 3rd overall selection in the 2025 NFL draft, I personally would not draft Shedeur Sanders. Now, we do have a special guest, and I wanted to kind of, skip a lot of the BS today, right? I didn't want to get off into, the long, lengthy introduction. Everybody knows who this guest is. I just want to bring him up, and let's get right to it. Y'all throw some biceps in the chat one time for the gang. Y'all know who it is. Bobby Skinner from Giants Nation is in the building. What's going on, Bobby?
What's going on, my man? I'm sure you had to make sure you didn't say the wrong thing. On the new show, I've said, talking Giants 3 different times, but I'm excited, getting ready for the draft. It's all hectic, but it's fun.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. What are your thoughts on Shedeur Sanders and what the New York Giants should do with the 3rd overall selection in the draft here coming up?
Well, to keep a long story short, and I'm going to tell you the long story, I agree with you on Shedeur Sanders. And, I went through all the film, put together a 45 to 50-minute film breakdown, breaking down every individual part of Shedeur Sanders that I like and dislike. And everyone, I feel like it's gotten pretty simplistic with some of the negative on Shedeur. It's he doesn't have the arm, he doesn't have the athleticism. I think he's got an NFL arm. He throws the deep ball pretty well. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be someone you're putting in zone reads and stuff, but he can run up through the pocket. He can make a guy miss here or there. Now, those are Big 12 guys. I don't know how it works in the NFL. My issue is because he has that high completion percentage and again, had success. It's, he's just a great processor. He's great pre-snap. He knows where to go with the football at all times. It's a thinking man's position. And my issue is what I outlined in that film breakdown is there was anytime defenses threw some type of like coverage rotation or whatever disguised coverage, he would be lost, man. And they would just be hesitant, not lost like, oh, he got over aggressive and took a chance, just hesitant. And then when you're late and then you don't have the big arm or the athleticism to make up for the mistakes, there's times where Cam Ward didn't see what it was, but he was able to make up for it with the arm or using his legs. Why am I betting on that at 3? Right? If I like talk myself into, we use the word ceiling too much. I think we should add a word in front of it, and it's realistic ceiling. Theo Johnson's ceiling is best tight end of all time. Realistic ceiling is probably like a Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
Realistic ceiling, it's like Kirk Cousins, which again, I'm okay with getting Kirk Cousins in the draft, but again, that's the realistic ceiling with it. I'm just not betting on it with Shedeur. And like you said, the sacks, that matters too, right? And it's not just one bad play. It leads to 2nd and 18. Sacks are drive enders for teams. And what am I betting on and why am I betting on it, right? If you don't have the big arm, I feel like you got to be A+ from the mental side. And I feel like he's B+ or B-.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I do think that there has been a few like just hot terms that a lot of people have been throwing around when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, and anticipation is one of them that you see a lot of people online talking about. But for the most part, from what I've seen on the tape, and like I said, I've done 2 passes on Shedeur Sanders, and the second pass really made it solidified for me the way that I felt. I had to draw a line in the sand that I would not draft him 3rd overall. But as far as I see on the tape, the anticipation to me is a guy that has to see it come open. There are a few instances where you can see that type of NFL anticipation, but that is one thing that I think that a lot of people are just running with. And the mechanics, when you look at the mechanics, there are times where Shedeur Sanders is lined up right on the hash, and that drop back is squiggly as a snake is, and he's just not a straight back type of guy. I feel like he likes to lean towards his left tackle, but like I said, some of that could be those deficiencies up front. They didn't have a tight end that was in line that was doing a lot of blocking this year. Their running game was not all that great, so I do understand that they had to supplement, the lack of that running game, with a short passing game. But at the end of the day, when you turn on the tape and you look at some of the games, the amount of just quick throws, it's so redundant in my opinion. And when I look at the other quarterbacks in this class, guys that aren't being put up on a pedestal as high as a guy like Shedeur Sanders, I look at it from a value and a productivity standpoint, right? Like, if I can go out there and I can get a quarterback in the 3rd round who, in my opinion, might not be that far off of what a Shedeur Sanders is, the blank canvas that we're going to have entering the NFL. I'm looking at some other quarterbacks as well, guys like Will Howard. I'm a big fan of Curtis Rourke. I know he's flying under the radar because he had the ACL surgery at the end of the year. But I do think that from a value standpoint that you could get a guy in the room. If the desperation is to just get a quarterback in the room and take a swing, my thing is at 3, that's a little bit high, especially considering that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen I don't think they're quite on the hot seat that a lot of the fan base thinks, but they are going into a season where they need victories. I think that victories is going to be the real, defining point for these guys, whether or not they're going to be here for the next couple of seasons or not. So from Brian Daboll's perspective, do you think that it makes sense? I see a lot of people saying that, a rookie quarterback could possibly spare him or save him his job. And my response to that was, Caleb Williams didn't save jobs in Chicago and Drake May didn't save jobs in New England. But do you think that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll could benefit from drafting a rookie quarterback that high in the draft? And also, are there any other guys that you might be looking at, in an ideal situation in some of the later rounds, maybe day 2, day 3 in the draft as well?
If he looks above average, but that's like I don't think drafting one on day 3 saves their job. Like you mentioned with Caleb Williams and Drake May, a lot of times rookie QBs get coaches fired because they show some promise, but it's like, but why aren't we winning games? Well, let's fire the coach and we got to build around him and make everything right away. I mean, hell, Pat Shurmur, right? He got canned because the defense everyone was 22 years old and, they gave up 30 points per game. But I do want to go back on the Shedeur, like what you said, like the drifting in the pocket.
Yeah.
Everyone will say, the sacks, right? Because he does. He drifts into his left tackle, and that gives Chris. The other thing it does, it gives away the keys to safeties. Like a safety is looking. It's like, oh, he's drifting this way. That's where he's looking for on the throw. I'm gonna take a chance and go after it. But I put out a tweet about a week ago of like the day 2, day 3 QBs since 2016. The only successful ones, and what I'll say successful is top 20, we can argue if Sam Howell or Josh Dobbs are like good 5th and 6th round picks, but like
Yeah.
top 20 QBs is Dak, Jalen Hurts, and Brock Purdy. Those are the only 3. And I don't like taking the date because it's usually a wasted pick, right? And even if you say, oh, well, they could be a backup, most of them aren't even good backups when you look at the list of players they put out there. Where I will make the exception is on supreme talent, and that is Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
Now at pick 34, I think it's insane because I think if you're taking Jalen Milroe, you're admitting that this is probably a wasted pick. Because he's not a good quarterback right now. He completed 20 passes twice. It's a mess. But he's a legitimately elite athlete. Like Malik Willis was a really good athlete. Jalen Milroe's an elite athlete, and he's got a bigger arm than most, than the guys in this draft. Everything's on a line, which is an issue. But I'm okay with taking a Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round because you're just taking a chance on supreme talent. And you look at the history of 3rd round picks, especially for the Giants. It's like, okay, I'm more willing to take the chance. At 34, no, I just, tweeted out the last, the 10 picks at pick 34. 7 of them are like Pro Bowl level players. But I'll take a chance on a Jalen Milroe. Where I don't get down is with like Jackson Dart or Tyler Shugg, even though I think Shugg is probably like the 3rd best QB. I don't really get down with those guys.
Yeah, I think for Jackson Dart, I kind of have him in that similar ballpark as Shedeur Sanders. And I just don't have those 2 guys as 1st-round grades at this moment in time. And with the Giants in the position that they're in where they got to go out there and win games, that pick 34 is going to be super important. So for me, in an ideal situation, the Giants actually don't draft a quarterback in the first 3 rounds in this draft for me. Because if you don't get the quarterback at 3, now you might be pressing. A lot of people are talking about trading back in, or, even if a guy like Dart falls to the 2nd round, I think that you're going to be not necessarily wasting that pick, but you're going to be overlooking a lot of premier talent at that 34 position. For me, I'm looking at a lot of D tackles. I'm looking at some wide receivers. I'm just very enamored with the offensive side of the ball. And I look at the weapons that we have, and I feel like the weapons just aren't quite there for the New York Giants. Love Malik Neighbors. I think Darius Slayton is a pretty decent signing, although I thought he was going to be the odd man out coming into the year. You still have capable guys at the wide receiver position, but, if we could bring in, for me at least, a guy like a Jaden Higgins or possibly a Trey Harris, I would consider that at pick 34, depending on what defensive tackles are still on the board. And the 3rd pick is going to be important there, too, because if you bring in Abdul Carter, are you necessarily going to be targeting that defensive tackle with the 2nd pick, at 34? I do think there are guys that maybe in the 3rd and in the 4th round you could get that could be very serviceable playing next to Dexter Lawrence. I'm really looking at Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech. He's one of my favorites. I like Darius Alexander. I'd be willing to pull the trigger on Darius Alexander from Toledo as early as 34. A lot of people are saying he could possibly fall to the 3rd round. And then there's a slew of talent in the 1st round that, possibly could drift and fall into the 2nd round as well. Guys like Derek Harmon. There's just a bunch of guys. I mean, Kenneth Grant would be the ideal situation for me. I don't foresee that happening. But I do agree with you that, if you're going to go out there and draft a quarterback, a guy like Milroe with that foundation of a running skill set, it does give you, that ability to maybe have like a guy that, you kind of sit, wait, groom, develop, and then maybe in a year or 2 he's possibly ready to play. And then there's the whole thing where you could design some packages for him as a runner in his first year. So for me, I'm looking at a lot of weapons. I want to upgrade this offense where the defense looks really good this year. I love the Paulson Adebo signing. I love Javon Holland coming in, upgrading that secondary, bringing in Chauncey Golston from the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a big fan of all these moves, and I got to give credit where credit is due to Joe Shane, who has been a bit in the kennel, in the doghouse for me over the past couple of years. But I know you were in favor of the Darius Slayton signing. So how do you view the wide receiver room, and are there any wide receivers that you might be trying to target, not necessarily just at 34, but maybe anywhere within the draft?
Jack Betch is out of TCU is a guy I fall in love with, where I'm just like, I just know that guy's going to be a contributor for some team. Again, whether you move him inside, outside, I hate to do the reminds me of Puka Nacua, but it does remind you of Nacua, and I think Nacua is a little better on the the corner routes and stuff where Betch can't really separate on those, but it does remind you of him where there's just so much versatility with what you can do with him. But with that, I do look at that, and again, I was in favor of bringing back Slayton because it's like, all right, well, then if you don't bring him back, he's your only pending free agent that's worth more than a few bucks. We saw what Aziz and Jason Pinnock got. What did you let Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley walk for? To get Cap healthy, to just let more guys walk the next year when you don't have any pending guys? So I just didn't want to create a hole where there was. Now with Wandale, the word replaceable gets overused as well too, right? It's been used with Tumble Slayton. Oh, he's so replaceable. Well, then why wasn't he replaced in 5 years? Wandale is replaceable, especially in a Brian Daboll. We saw what Richie James was able to do in that role. You're gonna see, I think you're gonna see his numbers dip pretty severely with Russ and Jameis. Those are two quarterbacks who just do not fit what he does. DJ did. And I thought they overused him last year. If they want to not pay Wandale Robinson, especially now that they brought back Slayton, I'm okay with that. But when I look at pick 34, I just look at like four guys. We did our O-line preview. There's like a Donovan Jackson, Gray Zabel,
love Donovan Jackson,
Josh Simmons, and Josh Connolly. Could one of those guys fall to 34? We see first-round talents fall to 34 every year, and it's why it's such a great spot. The defensive tackle group, like you mentioned, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon. Can we get some of those guys, like someone from that group to fall there? Omarion Hampton, I did a mock draft with Connor Rogers. Like, I would like him more than any wide receiver, skill player at that spot.
I look at Omarion Hampton as a little bit. I like his skill set, and I think he's going to be a very successful running back in the league. But I think the first round, kind of a agenda and narrative, I think it's a little bit overhyped for a guy like Omarion Hampton that, as a running back, I don't view as generational. I'll say I don't see him coming into the league being a Jahmyr Gibbs like everybody's saying, or near Saquon Barkley type of pick. But I'm glad you brought up running back.
34, it'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, 34 would be pretty nice. I'd kind of prefer to push the running back spot where we would draft somebody at a little bit further down the line. Like, I'm a big fan of RJ Harvey, and a huge, I think that this is one of the biggest sleepers in the draft is Brashard Smith coming out of SMU. And I know that he might not fit the style that a lot of people want to bring in at running back because he's more of like a smaller third down scat kind of running back. But the pass catching ability, the history of being a wide receiver, and just the game breaking type of ability to really open up an offense. When I look at the Giants offense, I feel like defenses that have to scheme for us week in and week out, they're really just looking at Malik Neighbors. And honestly, I think that Malik Neighbors really wasn't truly like the plan for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. But when they got there, they felt like that would just help out Daniel Jones and help out this offense. But when you look at the way that they drafted, and the way that they brought in free agent wide receivers before Malik Neighbors, it was all these smaller stature type of slot type of guys. And I like what you said about Wandale Robinson a lot, because not only is Wandale Robinson replaceable, I'd like to move Malik Neighbors into the slot a lot more to be able to do some of the things that he did at LSU with Jaden Daniels, some of the slot fades and trying to open up this offense to try to make some more bigger plays downfield.
And when you have a Wandale, like, Daboll likes to move the pieces around, especially when it gets an empty. Like, we run the same play, but we move the players around. Wandale, it does get he can't move him to the outside. You get a guy like Jack Betch, and then you're able to move all these guys around a lot more often. Where every guy can run a slot fade, and Betch can run those those pivots and those choice routes that they like to scheme up for him. So yeah, I think having a someone like Betch, who I think is an outside receiver, he played mostly outside, but is someone who can move inside in the slot at 6'1", 215, and it's pretty hard to bring down.
Yeah.
Could
a lot of
definitely
people saying
help
move him to tight end. I've been hearing, and I'm a big fan of Betch. I love the Senior Bowl performance, and playing opposite of Savion Williams over there. He was the wide receiver one in that TCU offense. Does TCU scare you a little bit with things like Jalen Reagor and stuff like that?
A little, not with Betch. With Savion, yeah. Like, I don't like Savion Williams at all. It's just there's a hitch in his release. He had like the low. He's like 6'5". He has like the lowest average depth of target in the class. They gave him
issues, drops the ball a lot. Like, I think he's a playmaker, but he's definitely a project. You got to get him with the right team.
Yeah, ball comes into his chest. He jumps for passes he doesn't need to jump to. It just has like all the wide receiver red flags that you get. Where it's like, the highlights are really nice for Savion, but there's just no consistency as a player. Where at least like with Trey Harris, the Ole Miss wide receiver, I have worries about him, but at least I'm like, all right, I can see how this works, even if I'm not fully bought in on it. I know you mentioned Jaden Higgins. He's actually someone I haven't watched yet, so I can't comment on him.
Man, that dude, I really think he has a chance to be the best wide receiver in this class. And this class is not that great, led by Travis Hunter. Tedero McMillan was a guy that, dating back to last year, I was thinking about ways that we could draft Tedero McMillan last year. But, his stock has kind of dropped a little bit too. A lot of people kind of, zooming in on some of the finer details with some of his route running. But I'm still a big fan of Tedero McMillan. I think he can come into the league and have that kind of Mike Evans type of presence. But I want a big wide receiver like that, opposite of Malik Neighbors. I think that would really help this offense move. And, I think that they're kind of still stuck on the Jalen Hyatt thing. And, today, Joe Shane in the press conference, he said we have the luxury of having 3 good wide receivers. That's why I really wanted to talk about this with you because, I think that we do have 3 pretty decent wide receivers, but that kind of is something that is a theme around the NFL. And what we don't have is a 1A, 1B. And if you look at the offenses that are successful with quarterbacks that are not dual threat quarterbacks, they all have a 1A, 1B type of situation. And some of the dual threats even have that, like Jalen Hurts has that with Philly. You look at Miami and what they're doing with their 2 wide receivers. You look at San Francisco with Debo and with Brandon Ayuk. I mean, you go all around the league from Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf to now DK going over there with George Pickens. I just think we need to upgrade that room. Do you think that we'll be okay going into this season without maybe addressing the wide receiver room and just rolling out there with Darius Slayton, Malik Neighbors, and Wan'Dale Robinson?
On a roster that's not very good, I'll at least say it's not that's the wide receiver room is actually probably the least of my worries, even though I'm not the biggest Wan'Dale fan. I think he can hold it down in the slot. Slayton, I think, is a solid wide receiver too. Flawed, but a solid wide receiver too. And we always talk about like quarterback play, holding guys back, right? Like Neighbors is someone, he can explode with the quarterback, but he's going to ball no matter what. Mm-hmm. Wan'Dale in the offense with Daniel Jones and Brian Dable, I thought his numbers were overinflated because of the quarterback play, not because it's better, but because of how the quick game stuff. Slayton's the one who I feel like has been held back by quarterback play. We saw just a little bit of it when Tyrod got real aggressive in the end of 23. He was putting up, big plays every single week. And again, if you're bringing in a young quarterback, I think wide receiver 2 is so important. If he can hit at all 3 levels like Slayton can create explosives, and where he's going to be, right? That's one of the reasons Hyatt can't get on the field. It's not, he's not a great route runner, or it's like, well, you're kind of limited to playing in one route because you put him on anything else, he's getting pressed to the sideline or pressed inside the numbers, and the quarterback gets to the second read, and he's not where he is, and it's just hard to trust a player like that. Yeah. So I even forgot what the question is, but I think that I'm fine with the wide receiver room. If they want to upgrade it, be my guest. If that's best player available at 65 or 99, not gonna stop me from taking a wide receiver, because eventually you do have to replace Slayton. But it's definitely not my like urgency. It's not where I feel urgency. Where I feel urgency on the O line, the D line, quarterback. Even though I'm probably not picking any of the guys outside of Cam Ward or Milroe in the late third. Tight ends probably not. But yeah, I don't have a lot of urgency on wide receiver. But if they get Jack Bech, who I love, like I'm celebrating.
That's what's up. Yeah, there are a lot of day 2, day 3 wide receivers I've had my eyes on. I'm a big fan of Ricky White III out of UNLV. I like Jack Bech. I think the speed could possibly be an issue, but he's going across the middle, doing the possession stuff. I am a big fan of his. I like Kyle Williams out of Washington State a lot. I think he could come in and really make some plays for us. But if it's not wide receiver, I know you mentioned Amarion Hampton, if you can't get a running back like that. So how do you view upgrading this offense going into this year?
So running back is a position I am behind on, right? We're actually not even doing like a running back preview, even though they've had like top 30 visits. I have a catch-up list, right? Like Jaden Higgins is on it. So once we finish our last preview, and this week, I'll spend next week catching up on the players. I'm just going to spend one day doing all the running backs. But again, Amari Hampton is one that I like because I just like, let me just look at someone at the top of the class before I look at some of the guys at the bottom. But when I look at the, go through, I run through the simulators, right? Everyone like running backs to strengthen the class. I just find myself in the first like 5 picks being like, oh, I like this defensive tackle or this, this whatever position. And then I get to the 5th round and all the running backs that I like are not there, right? So like, because it's the strength of the class, you may not be able to wait because there might be a big run on them between picks 34 and 99. So if you don't pick one at 34 and 65, you may be, left without a dance partner at the running back spot. But I look at the offensive line. Like at pick 34, I look at, again, Donovan Jackson, Gray Zabel, Josh Simmons, and Josh Connolly. If one of those guys falls to 34, I just don't see how I wake up Friday morning wanting someone else besides them. And again, unless there's one of those DTs that that I like that fall. Like, again, I'd like those guys over Hampton, like them over any of the receivers. Haven't watched Higgins yet, so I could change my mind on that.
Yeah, Higgins is definitely going to bring some excitement to the table, man. He's he didn't really have the great quarterback play to really make the big plays down the field. So, those large receptions over 40 yards and stuff like that, there's not a lot of that on his tape. But the route running is very refined. He's got that big body, lean. He can get open. He can get the 50-50s. I think he's kind of like what we thought and what we envisioned we were going to get in 2021 when we brought in Kenny Galladay. I think it's going to be a similar type of vibe of that. But the draft process gets you excited about prospects, and then when the draft comes, a lot of those prospects are going to go to other teams. And unfortunately, I do think Jaden Higgins is going to be one of those guys. To what you said about the running back class, a lot of people are saying like this might be the deepest running back class ever. And I'd probably have to go in to kind of compare that to some of those classes. But for me, the fall off kind of is kind of drastic once you get down the line. Like, I do like Caleb Johnson. I got to see him in person at Maryland when they played the Terps and whatnot. I'm a big fan of his, tough running back. I like Bashul, too, not of Virginia Tech. Shout out to my dog, Jay Gadsby, in the building, too, who definitely put me on to a ton of good running backs over there on Bleacher Report. There's a few guys, but I do feel like the fall off is kind of drastic when you start getting down there to guys like Woody Marks that are probably going to go in the 5th round out of USC and running backs around that range. I do foresee it falling off a good bit. Love what you said about the offensive line stuff. So Ohio State, I was a big fan of their line. And when Josh Simmons went down with the injury, the way that Donovan Jackson came in and filled in, who wasn't really a tackle, came in and filled in at tackle, normally was playing guard. Ideally, if he's there at 34, I'm gonna absolutely pull the trigger. But I think that he's likely the only offensive lineman that I really have my eyes on at 34. I don't foresee a guy like Gray Zabel falling that far. And Josh Simmons, I don't know if I would draft a tackle, a pure tackle that early. And I kind of want to know if we did draft one of the pure tackles like a Josh Simmons, where do you envision their role in year one? Are they going to be like a depth piece kind of sitting the bench as a swing tackle, or do you view them getting meaningful snaps in their first year?
I'm not stressing about year one because in reality, I know Illuminor's probably gone after this year. You saw his tweets about the contracts players are. I mean, look at what fucking James Hudson brought in.
Yeah.
Like he may be out of here, right? He might outprice himself. And I don't think he's going to be happy moving into guard. So it would be frustrating to have that pick 34 and a guy that's not an immediate play guy. Now, with the injuries that have happened to the Giants offensive line, specifically to Andrew Thomas, don't worry. Your backup O-linemen usually find a way to get on the field. There will be opportunities, but I would look at the same way the Jets did with Olu last year, right? Mm-hmm. They were in win now mode, and it's like, oh, you can't take Olu, you got to take Bowers, and Bowers may have been the better pick. But let's just say Bowers wasn't in play there. Like, I think they're happy with Olu, despite the fact that they had Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses at tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. So just building more depth and more of a now piece, but also a future piece as well. All right, let me tap in with some of these super chats real quick, and then we'll get off into the Giant Overreactions. I know people have been waiting for that. I kind of want to see how you react to some of these as well. Big shout out to my dog one time, Bless Up KG, in the building for the 199 super chat. He said, Authentic and Bobby, shit, couldn't miss this. Big shout out to Bless Up KG, coming all the way over from Bleacher Report. Been rocking out with us for a long time. Shout out to Elias Wiskovich. I always love saying that, Wiskovich, one time in the building with the 499 super chat. He said, had to come out here for Authentic and Bobby, two of the best in the game. Giants Nation is blessed to have two as content creators. Salute to the homie Elias one time in the building. And we got another non-Giants fan in the building. Big shout out to Door Gunner one time with the $5 super chat. He says, been a hot minute since I caught a live stream, been busy with work, ready for my Commanders to get another season sweep of the New York Giants. Damn. Throwing shots. How do you feel like we're lining up in the division right now, Bob? You think we're kind of closing that gap a little bit with the defensive moves we made?
No.
No, right?
like I know Dallas had a down year, but if Dak's healthy for the majority of the year, they're a 9-win team.
Yeah.
The Eagles are, Super Bowl champs, and then I think you can make an argument that Jaden's the second best QB in the NFC, right?
Yeah.
And could be better, right? Like the only guy I think that would be, you say better, is Stafford, and maybe that's just because you don't want to get over eager with a rookie QB.
Would you consider Goff?
No. I'd take Jaden over. Not even just like for the long term. I'd take Jaden over, Goff for 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah, Jaden's definitely hit the ground running, man. One of my favorite quarterbacks. I'm still salty we missed out on Jaden Daniels with the run that we made, in 2023 to miss out on him, and then back-to-back years it seems like we're about to miss out on a quarterback. We had
He's
Cam Ward
convinced
right
me you
there,
have to get those goggles that
the
he used
VR.
at that. Like again, the way he like kind of not even just way grew from college to the NFL. Those first 2 weeks of the season, Giants were one of those games, the Bucks.
Hmm.
He had no desire to throw the ball. I was
Yep.
like, oh my gosh, we got ourselves another Justin Fields on our situation. Just no desire to throw the ball. And then it feels like the Bengals, they ran that cover zero blitz. He hits Terry McLaurin.
Oh my
And it
God,
just
what
felt
a
like
throw!
at that moment, that's when it like really clicked for him. And then he started to take off. But like you look at those first two games, he was not looking to throw the ball. And then on 3rd and 4th down, you just can't tackle him. And Quinn's willing to go for on 4th down. It's huge, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if
week
if
one
Dan
they
Quinn
got
wasn't
walked by
so
the Bucks.
willing
I
to
think
go,
it was.
say it again.
I think in week one they got dog walked by the Bucks, and then week two was against us, I believe.
Yeah, it was the
I was
game
at that
without the
game.
kicker.
Hmm.
So where they couldn't score a touchdown, but I think they kicked 7 field goals in that game.
Yeah. Every time they got down to the red zone, they stalled out. I was actually at that game. Jaden Daniels, I thought that coming into the league, he played the way that I expected, at least from a running standpoint. Using his legs as a foundation on 3rd down when things weren't there. But I think that he has a lot of room to grow as far as what we saw in college as a passer to translating that into the NFL. I expect him to have a pretty big sophomore year here. And I thought that, Washington really had the advantage of like the 4th place schedule, not playing teams over 500, and they were ramping up as the season kind of went along. So by the time they got to the playoffs, everyone really understood that they were a dangerous team. If they wouldn't have made some of these moves in the offseason, I would have looked at them as a team that was going to regress a little bit here, playing a bit of a tougher schedule. But I think now bringing in Deebo Samuel and then pending what they do in the draft here, that's a team that's probably likely going to be right back, in either a conference championship or a divisional round playoff game as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing this season, but I do agree with you. I don't think we've closed the gap. I'm just hoping for a little bit of luck this year. I'm getting tired of just like, being eliminated before the end of October and just
Dude,
the poor New York Giants play.
Especially when you got to talk about it. It's one thing if it was like, before I did all this stuff, it's like, all right, well, I'll just watch the other games at 4:00.
Yeah.
Now I got to rewatch the game, rewatch the film, record. It's brutal. Unfortunately, I don't understand how the Giants have like the legitimate toughest schedule in the NFL going into the year.
Yeah.
Which is just wonderful. But what was I gonna hit on? Something with the Larry Tunsil edition, right?
Amazing.
The fact that the Texans are like trashing him on the way out, and Texans fans are coping, like, get the fuck out of here. Like Larry Tunsil being added to him, now his blind side is completely protected.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, we saw Daniel Jones splits with and without Andrew Thomas. Not like he was a superstar with Andrew Thomas, but like his numbers were like double with and without Thomas. Now you get Jaden Daniels where his blind side's completely protected. And just the pressure he puts on the D-line because of his legs, that's huge, whether Deebo Samuel ever takes a snap for them or not.
Yeah, he did that all last year. He looked serviceable from a, pressure and taking sacks kind of perspective last year with an offensive line that really lacked personnel. I know a lot of Giants fans saw Bobby Johnson going over there and were thinking like, man, that offensive line is going to be trash. You guys are in for a surprise. And they were pretty decent. I mean, Jaden took a lot of sacks this year, but I think that's just a theme with a lot of quarterbacks that like to extend plays with their legs. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him play this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing Michael Penix play this year. I was watching one of your shows where you were talking about, man, all the people that are trying to get me on the Michael Penix receipts early on right now, and I do feel you on that. Michael Penix has, a very small sample size on his resume right now, but I went and I did a small, I wouldn't even call it a review. It was just like watching some all 22 and some cut-ups on Michael Penix's last game against the Carolina Panthers, and man, like, that arm talent from Michael Penix, that's the kind of quarterback that I would be willing to draft with the 3rd overall selection. Like if Michael Penix was in this draft at 3, it'd be a no-brainer for me. And when I compare guys like Shador to some of the guys from last class, J.J. McCarthy, some people were high on him. I wasn't as high on him. But Michael Penix in particular, a guy that I think right now is already at the point where he's a top 10 quarterback as far as arm talent goes. So looking forward to seeing him play. What are your thoughts on that class from last year in comparison to this year's?
With Penix, I feel like you said, it's a small sample size. So if you like Penix, he did enough to make you still like him. And if you didn't like him as much, I said it, I can't remember what show was on recently, where it's like it was kind of crazy watching because like, oh my God, what a throw, what a read. And then the next play, he's missing a guy by 10 yards. And I think he ended up with the highest missed throw rate in the NFL. Again, small sample size.
Yeah.
So that obviously if you miss whatever in one game, but it was all 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants game, he didn't have to do much because we threw 2 pick sixes in the first like 10 minutes.
I think that
But
was his only
that
win, too.
Commanders game, right? Like he had that great throw at the end, but like he also was just miss,
Mm-hmm.
and even had an interception on that. My worry with Penix is when the pressure really gets down, like you see that Michigan game, the accuracy to me folds, and then he doesn't have the legs to create. But I do think Atlanta is a good situation for a QB where you've got that run game, you've got Jake London, Darnell Mooney showed what he's capable of, and an offensive line. And Zach Robinson, I think, is my candidate to possibly become like a head coach after this year.
Yeah.
Because he was so limited with Kirk that he couldn't do anything. But if you look at like trees of coaches that work out the most, it's been the Sean McVay tree. So I think they're in line for a good situation there where we at least know what we got out of Penix.
Yeah, I think when
JJ
you drive
did
the
play
ball like that, you can tend to be a little bit inaccurate sometimes. And I think that's where he kind of lacks, a certain skill set in his game is that layering and having that certain touch on some of those throws. But he's a guy that, man, every time I see him drop back and throw the ball, and in that game against the Panthers, tons of drops. Even the interception that happened in that game was one that was low that got like popped up, by Kyle Pitts and whatnot and intercepted. I'm looking for Michael Penix to have a pretty big year this year, and not necessarily just to tell people I told you so or anything like that. But I'm just rooting for Michael Penix. The way that he, the way that the NFL doubted him during the draft process, and you're starting to see that happen with guys in this particular class. I feel like as well.
And then you mentioned JJ didn't play, so I'm not changing my opinion on him. Bo Nix was the one, and it was like I think his film's pretty good. But it was like that Oregon screen game, a lot of quick throws. But he was a much better creator than people gave him credit for. Like I liked his film significantly better than JJ McCarthy's, but I kind of let the age creep into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw him early on this year. Like if Denver's defense wasn't number 1 in the NFL, we wouldn't be talking about Bo Nix at all, even though he did finish the season strong. Those first like 6-7 games, like it was legitimately the worst QB play in the NFL. Like he couldn't hit a pass. And then it just really clicked for him. So I always liked Bo Nix. The question is ceiling and what are we looking at 3 years from now? I'll never get rid of the high standard for first round quarterback. I understand that getting the 14th best quarterback in the NFL is more important than Malik Neighbors for that season. But my goal is Super Bowls, and I will always have a high standard with quarterback. Like I have to have some reason to believe that you're going to be a consistent top 10 guy.
Yeah, that's definitely real. And with Bo Nix, I'm also intrigued with what's going to happen here in the sophomore year because Denver, and I could tell you watch a lot of ball, bro, because a lot of people wouldn't say that about Denver. People are just like, Bo Nix is out here lighting it up. That defense was absolutely amazing. And the other thing, their schedule, you look at I want to say it was 10 wins for them this past year. They had 1 victory against a team that was above 500. They technically had 2 victories against a team that was above 500, but the last game of the season was against the Kansas City Chiefs where they rested all their starters and they dog-walked the Chiefs in Week 18. But I'm looking forward to seeing them play a little bit more superior competition rather than inferior competition that they saw in 2024 and see if Bo Nix can still live up to the hype. But, not to take away anything from him, that wide receiver core over there was nothing special. And, he went out there, especially in the back half of the season, and really got the job done. So,
again, like the first 7 games, like he threw like 5 picks. He was averaging like less than 200 yards per game. They won 1 game 10-9, and then it just really clicked for him. Like I said, level of competition wasn't great, but he made some big plays here and there. So I think Bo Nix will be a solid starter.
Yeah,
and I liked his film a lot more than JJ. I even had him ranked above Penix, and maybe a little bit of Penix's injury history, but the Michigan game spooked me a little bit with Penix, but we'll see. I think if I'm wrong on these quarterbacks, then I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I haven't changed my opinion on any of them though yet.
Yeah, a lot of people think that like content creators get so fixated on being right, and I'm starting to see that on social media. People are like, "Oh, you guys are dragging Shedeur Sanders now because of this, that, and the third," and I just don't agree with that.
I'll say this because most people won't admit this when you get into content. You do want to be right.
Absolutely.
Now, if Shedeur gets drafted by the Giants, then I'm rooting to be wrong, right?
Yep.
But not every quarterback succeeds in the NFL. Some of them have to fail. I would prefer the ones that I predicted to fail to be the ones that fail. If they don't, I'll admit I was wrong. But yeah, like, would I prefer, like, all right, you have 15 quarterbacks in the NFL are going to be bad. I would like it to be the ones that I predicted. If they're not, they're not. But I want to, and if they're not, I'll try and learn from what I was wrong on those guys. But
Yeah,
like,
and
we
I
all
think
have
that's
bias.
why we want to be right? Is because you put in the time, you put in the work for it, and you don't want it to be all for nothing in a way, where you're like, okay, I've looked at these quarterbacks over and over and over and over again, and if they do come out and prove you wrong, then there's something flawed in the evaluation process, right? Which I think all of us have flaws in the evaluation process,
Yeah.
obviously,
Especially with QB. The difference is if they get drafted by the Giants. That's where please prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Where I do think there is a small level of people who would rather be right about whatever take on, even not even just quarterback,
and have the team be
if
shit.
you didn't like Tyler Nubin, people were like, I'm rooting for Tyler Nubin to miss tackles. So I can say that, he was too slow or whatever. But I think that's a very small minority.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. All right, I know your time is very limited, man. We definitely appreciate you pulling up. For those of y'all that don't know, check out Bobby on Giants Nation. He just launched a new podcast. It's great to see you flourishing as fast as, from shifting, from one position.
I thought we were going to do some overreactions.
Well, we are.
Okay.
Don't definitely not jumping the gun. Just wanted to put the plug out there for people to go check them out at Giants Nation. I haven't had a chance to put the link in the description, but I will get to that as soon as we get off. And I've been waiting for this moment too, man. The Giant Overreaction portion of the show is my favorite portion of the show. So for those of y'all in the chat that don't know, the way that we do this is we're going to post statements on the screen that come from Twitter. And, if you deem that the statement on the screen is an overreaction in the chat, I'm going to need you to put an O. So that would be if you disagree with the statement and you think it's an overreaction, put an O in the chat. If you agree with the statement on the screen, I'm going to need you to put a U in the chat, which means you're going to be taking the under. And that is just saying that you are in agreement. If you need a little bit more time, maybe you need to get to the draft to really figure out what's going on with some of these overreactions or not, then you can put a P in the chat and represent that you are taking the push. I hope that Bobby does not take the push on any of these and take the easy route out.
No,
I got 3 giant overreactions to go over today. And we'll leave the quarterback one here for second or third. Let's start off with the first giant overreaction here. All right, Bobby, this one comes from NY Giants Posts. Shout out to NY Giants Post. He says, Abdul Carter and a defensive tackle in a deep class could be the final piece to the puzzle for this defense. What are your thoughts on this statement here? When you look at the roster is definitely looking in much better shape. In case you need a quick little refresher right here, right on Bobby, this is our updated starting defense right here. And in my opinion, that 3-tech defensive tackle is probably the only weakness on this entire defense from a starting perspective. We all know how important depth is. Bobby, what are your thoughts on this statement about drafting Abdul Carter, bringing in a D tackle, if that could be the final piece to solve the puzzle for the New York Giants defense?
It's not a final piece to make it this elite defense, but yeah, those are, and defensive coordinator, I think, is kind of a hole on this defense as well. I mean, I love Abdul Carter, right? Like, I know there's, let's find some flaws in his game because I want a quarterback or whatever, but like this whole like, oh well, how are you going to play run defense? I don't know. I feel like the guy who had 24 tackles for a loss is going to contribute in some ways. Like if you double team him, you can move him. Congrats. We got a guy, but if you don't, he's going to make you whiff as a tackle, and he's got the instincts to make you miss. So Abdul Carter, again, I think he would be the best pass rusher on the team, and that's why you would take him 3rd overall. And then a defensive tackle. But I won't just say a defensive tackle. Every year I do draft philosophies on my draft day podcast. Mine this year I think is going to be on the double dip. Defensive tackle is the strength of this draft class. Take 2, take 3. Ooh, right? Like I did a mock draft. I took Derek Harmon, Aeneas Peebles, and Cam Jackson in the 2nd, 4th, and 7th round. If they want to pick a defensive tackle at 34 and 65, not going to hear me complain one bit. So, yes, now injuries take a big toll. The secondary, I'm not as confident as other people. Banks, I don't think sliding in the cornerback 2 just fixes him, even though I do have hope. And I wanted Paulson Adebo, but he's not a perfect corner. He gives up yards. He has he lost the game against the Falcons this year for the Saints. And then Javon Holland, we need more out of him than what he's been the last 2 years. I think he's been more of a preventer than a playmaker. There's only an interception is a Hail Mary against Tim Boyle. So I want to see more out of him. Tyler Newman needs to grow. Phillips needs to, figure out a way to get his hands on the football a little more, not just be a run defender. So I'm not as high on the secondary as others, even though I do see the potential of it, and it's very young. But that front would just be nuts when you have just having Carter and Dexter is nuts, and then you add Brian Burns to it, whatever defensive tackle, and then Kayvon as that third guy. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty excited about that defensive group.
Got you. So you agree with that statement on the screen? Not necessarily an overreaction.
Yeah, I put a U in the chat. It's not an overreaction.
That's what's up. I do see some mixed opinions. People talking about cornerback, linebacker, cornerback depth here. I see a couple overreactions, a couple unders here. Ben Harris says the Toledo defensive tackle would be ideal. Yeah, Darius Alexander's definitely a dog. I like what you said about double dipping at defensive tackle. I haven't heard anybody say that, and I think that would be a really good situation for the Giants. So I mean, it kind of seems like most people agree with the statement on the screen. Big shout out to my homie DeIlla one time in the building, and he's bringing up Travis Hunter here. He says Travis Hunter to me does more for your defense than Carter. We have 3 players that can provide pressure. Add Hunter with ball skills in the secondary, could be a turnover city. So with your ideal situation at pick 3, are you looking at more landing a guy like Travis Hunter and hoping that the Cleveland Browns go with Abdul Carter, or vice versa? Would you prefer Abdul Carter be on the board at 3 for the Giants?
I'd prefer Abdul. As much as I think Travis can do some two-way stuff, I feel like it is a challenge. And it's not just a challenge of doing it and doing it well. He's not a perfect corner, right? Like he can struggle at the catch. Like as much as ball skills are good, bigger receivers, they'd come down with passes where it's like, oh, how'd he come down with that one?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's so patient, he'll give up quick passes at times. Like this isn't like Sauce Gardner coming out of Cincinnati, where it's like, oh, he's just this shutdown corner where like you're just not getting anything against him. Wide receiver ones in the NFL will be able to have some big games on Travis Hunter as he grows. Like, I think he's more in that Derek Stingley type where, yeah, he's not someone you have to avoid, but he will make you pay here and there. I think Carter's better at pass rushing than Hunter as a corner. But if Hunter, if you're telling me Hunter is going to be a what he can be at corner and also giving you 20 plays at wide receiver, then yeah, I feel like the argument's a little better. But I feel like Hunter adds more to this defense, not even just day one, but as you plan for the future, as you make decisions on Deonte Banks and Kayvon Thibodeau.
Absolutely. Yeah, I look at the Travis Hunter situation as for me, it's more ideal at 3 because I'm looking for more help on the offensive side of the ball. So, I do think that Travis Hunter, is a guy that can play both sides of the ball. I don't foresee him coming into the league and being a full-time starter on both sides of the ball. But I think that the situation that he lands in will dictate which side of the ball he plays more snaps on. I think for the Giants, being that we brought in Paulson Adebo, you already got Andrew Phillips in the slot. Deonte Banks is a capable corner. At least he showed that his rookie season. I think we could benefit from having a guy like Travis Hunter do more on the offensive side of the ball. I'm more envisioning, having Malik Neighbors on one side, Travis Hunter on the other, and seeing how defenses could stop that, and then maybe sprinkling in a few plays or possibly being a depth piece at the cornerback position. But I'm okay with either of them. When it comes to pick 3 for me, I really feel like the Giants can really do no wrong. The only situation that would truly bother me is if Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are on the board, or maybe even if it's Shedeur and Abdul, but more with Travis Hunter on the board. If they draft Shedeur Sanders over Travis Hunter, I think that would kind of I'd feel a little bit spicy after the draft on if that was the situation that ended up happening. Yeah.
So again, if I prefer Abdul Carter, if they take Travis Hunter, that's not a pick where I'm like, I can't believe they did. I understand it's something that I don't have a strong enough take to be like they totally screwed this up. Even though I really do prefer Abdul Carter, I don't have any doubts on who I prefer over the two. But I agree with you. I don't think Shedeur Sanders Shedeur Sanders isn't the quarterback that I want at 3. And this idea of trading back up into the first round, that they seem to play games with that with Penix last year.
Yep.
And I'm a big believer that if you think a guy's worthy of pick 20 and trading up to pick 20, then you should think he's worthy of pick 3 and not screwing around with it. But
I was thinking about that recently. I saw a couple of homies talking about that on Twitter and whatnot. And, it made me think about the Baltimore Ravens situation because they had, I want to say it was either pick 24 or pick 25 in 2018. And they didn't draft Lamar there. They drafted a tight end in Hayden Hurst, and then they traded back into the first round to draft ultimately their franchise quarterback in Lamar Jackson somewhere in the 30s, I believe it was. So it is interesting. I don't think that that is a bit of an anomaly situation. I don't think there's really one way to approach it.
It can work, but if we
Yeah,
look back at it and if we were doing this all over again, we would have just taken Lamar at pick 25.
absolutely. Yeah,
You know, so that's my
absolutely.
point. It's not to say that it doesn't work. And I actually think there's another example of a team. I can't even remember, but there's another example of a team doing that and it working out. So I'm not saying
Yeah.
it can't work out. It's just if the Ravens had the first pick, or I guess you can argue between him and Josh Allen, but if they had a top 2 pick in that draft, they should have taken Lamar and not Hayden Hurst, a 25-year-old baseball player.
Yeah, and I think that that's something to keep in mind too, is that these players come in, these prospects come into the league with a certain foundation and a floor, and you to be a good evaluator, you have to envision where they can be. You know, a lot of people had put that stigma on Lamar Jackson that he was kind of getting the label and the reputation of what Jalen Milroe's getting coming into this draft as well. And you know, if people are going to have to redo the process, if Jalen Milroe has success, I think it'll be very similar as well.
The difference was Lamar was a great quarterback. He's a Heisman winner and stuff. For Jalen
Exactly.
Milroe, completed 20 passes twice in this
Yeah.
past season.
Very limited touchdown passes. He was more of a runner in college. 20, I think it was 20 rushing touchdowns or something like that.
I feel like the NFL has grown so much from the QB evaluation side, where like even let's say Lamar didn't even happen, but if Lamar came out in this class, I think he'd be going first overall, even if
Yeah.
there was no past Lamar. Because like, well, this guy is an elite athlete. He's got a big arm. He won a Heisman. Why wouldn't we take this way?
Yeah, major dual threat. The running quarterback now is definitely getting some more love. Big shout out to Chris Peace one time with the $4.99 super chat. He said, need to get Bobby to a Giants at Washington tailgate.
That's actually not an impossibility. My brother's a Commanders fan.
Okay.
And now that I'm not like, traveling on company diamond stuff, we kind of had the idea of like, maybe we should just go up to Washington and doing a tailgate there. I was at the Bucks Commanders playoff game, and Commanders fans fucking get down, dude. They took over Tampa Bay. Like Tampa didn't have any big time tailgates, and Commanders fans just, I mean, it was like a house party there.
Yeah, most of the Giants games that I've seen have been here in the DMV area at FedEx Field and Northwest Field, and the tailgates are always a great time. So if you pull up, man, I actually tailgated with Chris Peace and Sal from He's a Giant last year and whatnot. We had a great time, man. The Beard was over there. So if you pull up, man, we'll definitely show you some hospitality for sure. Does your brother stay in the DMV area or no?
No, he's where I'm at. We were thinking about making a trip up before it.
Yeah, definitely do it. Definitely do it. And Dorgunner came in with the $5 super chat. He said, ready to see Terry torch Deonte Banks again now that we have a quarterback. My wish is for the New York Giants staff to get canned after we torch that secondary. Dorgunner, you throwing shots right now at us, bro. I see you.
You should want the staff to stay if they have Deonte Banks covering Terry McLaurin.
That's true. That's true. That's definitely true. Big shout out to all you guys, man, in the chat, man. We're going to keep it pushing here to the next Giant Overreaction. This one is going to kind of be a little bit quarterback based. We're going to tap back into the Shedeur Sanders conversation here a little bit. So I'm a big fan of statements that can possibly split a room. And this particular statement from DeWeens, who's a homie on Twitter, this one had me really thinking, like, is there some validity to this here? He says, yeah, the Giants are going to fly a bunch of people to Colorado for a private workout, but aren't taking Shedeur Sanders at 3. Now, Tiki Barber was just on WFAN, and he speculated that he said something along the lines of the Giants may be positioning themselves to be the trade partner for whoever is desperate for a quarterback. Do you think that this statement on the screen is an overreaction, or do you kind of maybe agree with what's going on here, that the Giants would not be working out Shedeur Sanders this late in the process if they weren't going to be selecting him at 3rd overall?
Oh, it's an overreaction because they're doing the same thing with Tyler Shugg and Jalen Milroe. And, you don't believe press conferences, but I actually do believe Joe Shane when he's like, well, the draft is a week earlier than the last few years. Colorado did have their pro day, so these guys don't like to have private workouts. So guys, like, I actually believe his reasoning in that. So again, and they're working out Tyler Shugg and Jalen Milroe as well. And Joe Shane, if there's one thing he showed us this offseason by his actions, that he's not enthralled with taking Shedeur at 3, even if he does. I mean, he went all in for Stafford, waited on Rodgers, was willing to trade up for Cam Ward, and then signed 2 vet free agents when he swung and missed on his first 3 options. It's basically shown everything but wanting to draft Shedeur.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think it was Dan Duggan that was on your podcast that y'all had a conversation about that really was eye-opening for me. Shedeur Sanders was likely always going to be there at 3 for the most part. I think the earliest he was going to go is 2. I mean, maybe the NFL community and Twitter community didn't know, but I felt that the Titans were going to go Cam Ward number 1, And I thought he was always going to be there. So when you guys talked about that, I thought there was some great points there. Being that they were willing to trade draft capital to bring in Matthew Stafford, they waited for Aaron Rodgers and that whole, seeing what team he wanted to play for. Then they signed Jameis. If they don't sign Russ, I think maybe there's a little bit of room there for them to maybe draft Shador at 3. But double dipping on the veteran quarterback, I got to agree with you. And I do think that this is a bit of an overreaction. But, that draft day is coming up here. And I do feel like there is a small chance still that the Giants could surprise us and still go Shador Sanders at 3. I see the chat's kind of more leaning towards this being an overreaction.
Yeah, I don't think it's off the table. But with like Stafford they were not going to pair him with a first round quarterback. There's just no way. I know there's this idea of like, oh no, that wasn't happening. Matthew Stafford, he wasn't coming here anyways, but he wasn't coming here to be have the second and third round pick given up for him, and then the first round pick for his backup.
Yeah.
And you said if they sign Jameis and we're still sitting here and be like, Jameis is the QB1 on the roster, then I'd be like, oh, well, then we are drafting a quarterback because there's no way you're going into a season with just Jameis. But when you added Russell Wilson to that group, then that is a team that is, like Joe Shane said in his press conference, positioning himself where he doesn't need to take a quarterback he doesn't believe in.
Yeah, that's real. And, I also think, too, like if you draft Shador Sanders, then Jameis Winston becomes a $4 million AAV third-string quarterback. When you just paid Drew Lock $5 million last year to be the backup on a one-year deal, I don't think those numbers make a lot of sense. So I do think that the pick is leaning a bit towards, drafting Abdul Carter. And I think Tiki Barber's kind of spot on here. I usually don't agree with a lot of Tiki's takes, but with this particular take, I do think that they might be looking at that third overall selection and saying, okay, maybe we could get a haul for this pick and maybe trade out, and just seeing if teams are willing to, pick up the phone and have that conversation with the Giants about trading that pick.
I hope not, because I want either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Like, I've got my eyes set on those guys. Those are the guys they want. If we were picking at 8, would I get down with Armand Membu or whoever? Sure, but we're not. We're picking at 3. I used to be a trade down guy, and I think I'm becoming less and less that. Like, I just want the best players, and that's where they're going to be, is at pick 3.
Yeah, we've been here before in 2021 when we traded back and we drafted Kadarius Toney, and we had Michael Parsons right there on the board. And yeah, so I'd like to learn from those past mistakes.
Or even Rashawn Slater. If they drafted Rashawn Slater, they'd have the best tackle duo in the NFL.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, so I think most people are in agreement with this one. I do see a couple of yous here that agree with the statement on the stream, but I think for the most part, most people think this one is an overreaction. And I know Bobby's limited on time, so we got one more before we get him up out of here. We're going to take this one to the coaching staff a little bit here. Let's get off into the last giant overreaction of the day. All right, this one comes from John Dracy. I put the Michael Penix picture up on there on purpose and whatnot, just to kind of insinuate what happened last year. But John Dracy says that Shane and Dable deserve to be fired at this point if they pass yet again on another quarterback. So how do you feel about this one? You think this is an overreaction? And how do you feel about the Giants passing up on a quarterback again now? We're looking at Brian Dable, who's, going to be, third season now, and still does not have his quarterback, and when you look at Brian Dable's past here, the only quarterback that he has really had that was drafted during his tenure when he was an offensive coordinator for a team was really Josh Allen. And that's the only one that really stuck, And I know a lot of people like to put the label on Brian Dable as a quarterback guru or a quarterback whisperer, but when you look at the past quarterbacks that he's dealt with, the list is very limited of really good quarterbacks. It's really just Josh Allen, and the points per game, with Brian Dable as a play caller have not been good throughout his entire career outside of the 2 years from 2020 to 2021 where the Bills were third in points per game both of those years. So how you feel about this statement? Do you think that they deserve to be fired if they simply don't pass up on a quarterback?
Well, technically it's an underreaction because they deserve to be fired at the end of the season. No, and here's the thing is, like you, I don't want Shador, so that's what I'm rooting for. And can it get them fired or whatever? Because they go 4 years without drafting a QB, and would that be insane to think about? Sure, but guess what? I'm not a Joe Shane and Brian Dable fan. I'm a New York Giants fan, so they'll be gone, and I'll still be here hoping to get that quarterback that I want, and ends up turning into a good player. So, and this was, I told you I do like the draft day speech every year on draft philosophies. This was mine last year where I said, People are saying that if they don't draft a quarterback here, they may not get a chance to get one, and then they'll get fired without ever taking a swing on a first-round quarterback, and that's where they'll get fired. And I said that would not be why they didn't get fired. They would get fired because after 3 or 4 years, they would have a bad roster and no QB. You got to have one or the other. If you pick the quarterback and get that right, which again is the hardest thing to do in sports, or in football GM, is getting that quarterback. Right. So, we put in this magical quarterback and it's like, we'll just take him and he's good. Well, that's hard to do, even if it's the right decision to take him. Or you have a roster that is not good. And because of bad drafts or bad free agencies. And I feel like that's what we're looking at right now, is a roster that has improved this offseason. But when you look at it, it's pretty thin. You look at how the players are acquired. The draft picks have not contributed to this. If you think this roster is good, I'll at least say this. It's not because of 3 Joe Shane draft classes. Yep. It's because of Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and whoever else. And then obviously Malik Neighbors,
bringing in the new guys, Malik, obviously,
right. My favorite exercise of the season was the top 10. Let's go through the top 10 Giants and how they were acquired. That doesn't look good for Joe Shane. So that's why they'll get fired, is they didn't do either. If you do one or the other, you usually get to keep your job. They'll get fired because they didn't do either, build a good roster or get the franchise quarterback.
Absolutely. What was your thoughts on the 6th overall selection last year? Did you want to go with one of the quarterbacks that were remaining on the board, or were you more leaning towards Malik Neighbors?
Nope. I wanted Caleb, Drake, or Jaden. Yep. Didn't want JJ, didn't want Penix, didn't want Nix. Again, I have high standards for quarterback. Do I think or have reason to believe that you'll be a consistent top 10 QB in the NFL? Penix can be that. JJ, Nix, I don't think so, but he could. JJ, again, he hasn't played, so I'm not again. So again, I could be wrong. But no, I wanted Malik Neighbors, and that was kind of the emphasis of the draft speech. Is like, it's unfortunate. And here's the other thing about quarterback, and this, no one likes to admit this, and now I've admitted it 10 times, and it's become tiresome the way I say it. Getting the quarterback is about luck, right? Like if I get the GM job of the Giants tomorrow, and I was like, hey, I want to build a good run defense, or I want to build a explosive receiving group. Yeah. Through 4 years, you should be able to do that if you set out to do that. Quarterback is the one thing where it's just like, man, if we won 3 games last year, we'd have a quarterback. But we won 3 games in a year where 5 teams won 3 games, and a quarterback class has 1 quarterback. And that quarterback's probably QB4 in last year's class with Cam Ward. Patriots, if the Patriots don't miss a kick right in front of my face, the Giants probably have a quarterback. And it's unfortunately, it does have to do with luck, not just drafting one, but finding the right one has to do with luck, right? Yeah. If Ron Rivera is not the worst defensive coordinator in football, the Giants might have Jaden Daniels and the Commanders don't. But unfortunately, they let Tommy DeVito throw all over them.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels was definitely the quarterback I had my eyes on. Last year, I didn't create much content around the draft, and the only video I created was looking at some all-22 of Jaden Daniels. And I'm when drafting a quarterback, especially in the top 10 of the first round, I think outside of top 10, any other round, my philosophy would change. But I'm not trying to hit a double at drafting a quarterback in the top 10. I want to hit a home run. I want to get the quarterback that makes teams in the division a bit envious that they don't have that quarterback. And I feel that's what's happening with Jaden Daniels right now. A lot of people who don't necessarily follow the draft process didn't truly understand what a guy like Jaden Daniels was going to bring to Washington, a team that we dominated throughout the entire Daniel Jones tenure. And then they come in this year with a rookie quarterback, and although that first game was pretty close, the second one wasn't. Jaden Daniels just goes out there, and when his team needs him to make those plays that, those game-defining type of plays, you have a quarterback that you can rely on, even when the roster around him is not ideal. Because looking at Washington's roster with just Terry McLaurin on the outside, bringing in guys like Zacchaeus to play the slot and having success with a rookie quarterback, I think that just speaks more volumes for Jaden Daniels. Now, I would have drafted Michael Penix at 6 last year, but I was almost like pulling teeth to come to that conclusion, because just like fans are this year, I was very desperate, in the desperation of just get me out of this Daniel Jones era of football for the New York Giants. You started podcasting around the same time we did. I started in 2019. So all I know up until 2024 at the quarterback position is really Daniel Jones or him being hurt and a backup.
You basically started my career in this, is just
Yep.
breaking down Daniel Jones film all summer in 2019.
Yeah, one of the first like true evaluations that I put down on paper was Daniel Jones versus Dwayne Haskins. And I did feel like Daniel Jones did some things better than Dwayne Haskins, but from a raw ability standpoint, and I said this today on Twitter, if I had to go back in time, I would have absolutely not drafted the quarterback at 6. It wouldn't have been Daniel Jones. If it would have been a quarterback, it would have been Dwayne Haskins. And I know, rest in peace to Dwayne Haskins, but the way that his NFL career panned out, a lot of people would say that that's the wrong move as well. But I do think that the pressure of our market and being in New York and being away from the DMV market for Dwayne Haskins could have helped him leaps and bounds different than what was happening here in Washington with the immaturity issues and some of the off the field stuff that was happening during COVID. But the past is the past, and I do understand fans and the frustration that they just take a swing. But I'll continue to say that at least make sure that pitch is within the strike zone. And for me right now, when I look at Shedeur Sanders, I don't see it in the strike zone for me. If they had him as a second round, third round quarterback, then I would likely consider it. But with the way that the Giants are set up this year, bringing back Brian Dable, bringing back Joe Shane, and I thought that they would probably be fired. I wasn't calling for their jobs. I truly don't really ever do that. I thought that they would be fired, but bringing them back this year, I just think wins are that much more important. And turning the tide with this offense, you cannot continuously have an offense from a points per game perspective, from a yardage perspective, total yardage, and from a passing yardage perspective, be bottom third in the league every time you're here if you're considered to be a guy who is an offensive-minded, a high-level, high-ranking offensive-minded type of head coach, in my opinion.
I hate the phrase taking a swing. How about we use picking a player, picking a human being, and tell me why you're picking that human being. Because if you're telling me take a swing and not about the reasons why you're picking that player, yes, there's risk involved with everything. And if you hit on the quarterback, it's obviously way more valuable than anything else. But I hate the take a swing. Talk to me about the player and tell me why you're picking that player. If you believe in him, cool. But like like me not wanting Shedeur Sanders, you just got to go best player available. No, Cam Ward's not best player available. I'd want him. Yeah. Drake May wasn't better than Malik Neighbors. I wanted him. It's about picking a player and why or why not I'm picking that player. Like take a swing. Take a swing to me just turns into I just want a quarterback. And again, if I wasn't doing content, I'd probably be more on that side. We're just get me a quarterback. That's 6 years of Daniel Jones. I don't want to do Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. It's not entertaining to me when Russell Wilson throws pick 6 on my own team. I could probably feel better with that, but because we do content and QB evaluations and shit, it's just I want to pick a player, and that's not the player that I want.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. And I saw a debate about this earlier today where somebody was talking about when you factor in BPA, you also have to factor in positional value. And, just like quarterback has the highest positional value. So if you have a guy like a Cam Ward who's at the top of the class that you believe in, then technically that could possibly be one of the best players available because we're factoring in the positional value. And I know on the running back side of things that's kind of why I'm not as high on Amarion Hampton in the first round. But second round, I'd consider it. But I definitely think you do have to factor in the position. That's why I really would never draft a tight end in the top 5, top 10. I just don't see the value there at that position from a contractual standpoint and also from a impacting the game type of standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's within reason. Now, Brock Bowers, I think Brock Bowers was the number 5 player for me last year, and he's worked out for the Raiders. So there's always exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
If you took Saquon Barkley, I know because he went second overall and Josh Allen and Lamar, it's it gets muddied. But if Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson went off the board and then Saquon went 11th, that probably would have been a great draft pick for that team. That wasn't been a never-ending conversation about the quarterbacks you passed up on. So it's within reason, and there's exceptions to the rules and stuff. But again, Cam Ward is not the best player available. He's number 1 on my players that I would like to draft this year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It was like a 4-year agenda for me with Cam Ward. Shout out to my dog Stan, who put me on to him right when he transferred to Washington State. And even coming out last year, Cam Ward was a guy that I was even considering it. They were talking 4th round, 5th round. I was like, sign me up, man. I would draft him there and develop him absolutely. So it is a little bittersweet that he's going to be going to the Tennessee Titans. Some clips came out just recently of him playing like some Xbox and whatnot and talking about his top 5 receivers and his top 5 play callers. And all he was doing was just naming people from the Tennessee Titans organization. Like, it's like Calvin Ridley's the best wide receiver in the entire National Football League. So it's going to hurt to see him go over there. But I am wishing him a lot of success. I like the comparisons that a lot of people are making story-wise and on the field-wise to Steve McNair, who, came out of a small school himself out of Alcorn State and had a lot of success.
Yeah, I got to run after this, but I actually hated Cam Ward last summer because the only game I had watched was the UCLA game, and I watched it 5 times because I watched Darius Muasa, I watched Alex Johnson, I watched Latu, and I watched the Murphy brothers, and that was like the worst game he's ever played in college football. So I was just like, oh, this is what Cam Ward is, and then it's like, no, that's the worst game he played in football.
Yeah.
But fell in love with him pretty quickly. I just watched him at Miami.
Yeah, man. So before you dip out, just let the people let them know what you got going, new channel, any new videos you got going on, and what you got coming up in the next couple of weeks here leading up to the draft.
Yes, the Giants Nation show. We're obviously cranking out the draft previews. You got the breakdowns of the guys the Giants are most likely to pick at pick 3. You have Ward, Sanders, Carter, Hunter. I have the cornerback draft breakdown out. Wide receiver breakdown should be out tomorrow. We're previewing it. We're going to live stream the entire draft. We're going to react. We're going to have fun. And I appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for taking the time out your day, man, to come over here and rock with us on the Giant Overreaction, bro.
No doubt. Talk soon.
All right, fam. Be good. All right, y'all. So that's Bobby Skinner, man, and his stance entering the 2025 NFL draft, man. Definitely see very like-minded as far as the approach for the New York Giants going into the draft. I think me and Bobby are kind of locked in on the same kind of approach here. Not necessarily saying that that's the right approach, but that's just how we feel going into the draft. What the New York Giants should do with the 3rd overall selection. He's leaning a little bit more towards Abdul Carter. Even if, Travis Hunter was there for us at 3, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Travis Hunter. I know Bobby's more of a guy that is more focused on the trenches. I'm a guy more focused on the skill position, so I'm looking for a way to just possibly upgrade this offense and be able to score some more points. Definitely appreciate all of y'all spending y'all time with us today over here on Authentic and the Beard, this little small corner of the internet, man, where we like to just keep it real. Not too pessimistic, not too optimistic, but we like to just keep it funky and be realistic, man. Salute to all of y'all for just rocking out with us today, man, and throw some biceps in the chat for the homie Bobby one time for coming over here and taking a little bit of time out of his day. I know he's had a very, very busy schedule. Bobby been on pretty much like a press run, trying to build back up the platform that he spent so many years building, now jumping into a new piece of, his life and whatnot, and having to rebuild it. And I definitely have experience with doing things like that, and it's not easy. So I commend him for going out here and, really setting the bar extremely high, man. So salute to everybody again, man. Giants Nation was absolutely in the building. Y'all came out here and y'all represented for us today. Glad I got to tap in over here on the YouTube side of things as well. At 6 o'clock, I'll be on Bleacher Report. We're doing a bit of a draft war room. We're going to be talking about Giants' needs, positional value, just the approach to entering the 2025 NFL draft. And I'm hoping that maybe some people in that chat can convince me off of my stance. We'll be doing a Bleacher Report content creator mock draft on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you guys want to pop in and check that out, there's going to be 32 content creators. I'll be representing the New York Giants with the 3rd overall selection. And there'll also be some trades. There'll be some live talk, also reacting to some of the NFC East picks as well, which, fits very well with the theme over here on YouTube with the best division in football. Hopefully the Giants can raise the bar this year, win some games, and get back into the good graces of, being a part of that best division in football, being the NFC East, the division that holds the most trophies as far as Super Bowls go. Shout out to the gang, man. My day ones, I definitely appreciate you. Everyone who donated to the channel today, salute to y'all. That goes a long way because, without y'all, we really cannot keep this content at the high level that we keep it at. So definitely appreciate all you guys who chimed in and all you guys who donated to the channel. That's definitely blessed. Shout out to you guys again, man, and we'll be back here next week. I'm trying to get back to doing the Giant Overreactions on Monday, but it is very difficult with my schedule, with things here in the studio, and with the responsibilities over there with Bleacher Report as well. But we're definitely going to tap in before the draft gets here, kind of go over some final rankings. You guys know, as it stands right now, I've got Cam Ward as quarterback 1. I've got Jackson Dart as quarterback 2, with Shedeur Sanders as quarterback 2B. That 3, 4, 5 section is kind of sketchy for real. I'm a big fan of Will Howard if the Giants can find a way to draft him late in the draft. But outside of that, I think there's a pool of quarterbacks that all fit into a similar category. So we'll see how things stand. But definitely keep your eyes and ears peeled for the next installment of the Giant Overreaction. I'm going to be trying to bring in some high-level guests like Bobby as well, trying to bring in some of the beat reporters as well from the New York Giants community. But again, y'all know we can't do this without y'all. We end every show the exact same way. Keep raising that bar. Keep living those dreams, because the universe flows in Technicolor and surround sound, and a life without dreams is a life in black and white. Rest in peace to the podcast GOAT Combat Jack. Rest in peace to Kyron Lacey, and my condolences to his entire family. That is such a tragic situation. You know, I hope God can watch over them and give them strength throughout the next couple of, years and just for the rest of their lives, missing out with Kyron Lacey. But again, man, salute to Giants Nation. We appreciate y'all pulling up and rocking out with us today. We'll catch y'all on the flip side. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Wednesday afternoon. I'll catch y'all. Peace.
Spike don't care. Spike don't care.